Hey, y'all. Welcome to Cross Politic on the Fight Laugh Feast Network. Happy Memorial Day with Pastor Toby Chalk Knox. I'm the water boy, and we have Steve Deace and Naomi Wolf coming up here. And after a couple comments we have, it's Happy Memorial Day because we honor those who died for our country, and God sees that sacrifice and honors it too.
Yeah.
And but we don't celebrate like Ilhan Omar, who tweeted this out. On Memorial Day, we honor the heroic men and women who served our country. We owe them more than our gratitude. They have more than earned access to quality mental health services, job opportunities, housing assistance, and the benefits they were promised.
Okay.
That's literally what she tweeted out. Pretty amazing. But NASCAR also had this going yesterday.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars were so gallantly there, as though rockets were there, and the twilight's last gleaming, and the rockets' red glare were so gallantly there.
They were there.
Burst stripes were all there.
They're all there.
And the rockets were there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet play?
Play? Did he say play?
For the land of the free.
You got that right.
And the home of the brave.
That poor dude just got scrambled. I think all national anthems should be sung by this dude.
Why? Oh, this guy.
Yes.
Oh, this.
Oh, say, can you see
So good.
by the dawn's early light
Same boy.
Oh, no.
was so proudly we hailed
That's right.
at the twilight that's gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight.
Just feel it.
Oh, the ramparts we walked were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets regular.
Glory!
Oh, look at that Singletary. You got the
Through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave? Oh, the land of the free and the home of the brave.
So good. I mean, that's like Joe Biden's memory versus President Trump's memory. You know,
I don't know if that's the
contrast.
right.
Is that not a good
I don't know
contrast?
if that's the one that you're going for.
Okay. Way to ruin it, Kate.
But, oh, man. Chris Stapleton is, I think, a little better than.
So good.
White chocolate, everybody. White chocolate. Sorry. Go ahead.
Is your smartphone a tool in the service of Christ or a minefield of distractions and temptations? With soul-killing seductions just a few taps away, our families and churches must embrace biblical accountability, on our digital devices. Accountable to You makes transparency easy on all your family's devices by sharing app usage and detailed browsing history, including incognito mode with your spouse, parent, or chosen accountability partner. Accountable to You helps your family to proactively guard against temptation so you can live with integrity for God's glory. Learn more today. Try it for free at Accountable to You. That's the word accountable, the number 2, the word you.com/FLF. As Gabe mentioned a minute ago, we're very grateful to have 2 guests on this live stream on Memorial Day. First, Miss Naomi Wolf is a journalist and best-selling author who has been deplatformed 8 times, and she is still right. Naomi, thanks.
She got us to platform.
Thanks for coming back on Cross Politic.
Thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be with you again.
Absolutely. And our good friend Steve Deace, best-selling author, host of the Steve Deace Show on the Blaze Network.
And he's speaking somewhere?
He's a... Hold on. I'm doing the bio.
Okay. I'm just...
He's a proud hater of BS and is an idol smasher, it says, and will be one of the featured speakers at our Fight Laugh Feast conference in Fort Worth, Texas.
And
this October.
He's a bad man.
Steve, thanks for coming back on Cross Politic.
Guys, first of all, the pleasure is mine. Watching that NASCAR anthem rendition reminded me of my all-time favorite national anthem when Carl Lewis tried to sing it.
Yes.
At halfway, someone in the background goes, "Oh!" And I got to tell you, I thought it was unbelievable. NASCAR brought Frank Drebin back to sing the national anthem over Memorial Day. Those guys, man, in terms of marketing, they never miss an angle. Well done.
Yeah, that's so real.
It's nuts. So,
wow.
So we invited both of you on to talk about the Antisemitism Awareness Act that passed the House on May 1st. It's now somewhere in the Senate processing machine. This Anti-Semitism Awareness Act adopts the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition of anti-Semitism and is meant to aid federal anti-discrimination laws concerning education programs in particular. Appears to be a response to all the Hamas protests going on university campuses. So anybody who receives federal funding, financial assistance, would be affected by this. And it's giving guidelines to the Department of Education and requiring certain reporting and so forth on this definition, trying to prohibit this anti-Semitism. There's a whole bunch here that is mind-blowing to me, but I want to begin by asking Steve this, and then I'll come to you as well, Naomi. But why? I mean, this has like been passed. It passed like overwhelmingly through House, and I guess I'm really confused. Why this now? Why, and especially Republicans and conservatives. Why this now?
Well, if we're going to give people the maximum benefit of the doubt, it's because we have seen an alarming rise in anti-Semitism in the country. You know, reading through a history book, I can't think of any culture that ends well once anti-Semitism becomes a mainstream proposition. And I think that there's a lot of angry donors, particularly. I think for a lot of Republicans, this is largely driven by certain theological interpretations that much of their base has, not to mention their own personal convictions. And then on the Democratic side, I think there are a lot of wealthy, secular Jewish donors who have given to a lot of these universities and are just beyond appalled at watching these rallies that are taking place. That are just absolutely demonic, absolutely, Islamo-fascist and anti-Semitic, and they're feeling pressure on their side. I think the Republican side, there's pressure to respond to a base that has a large congregate of people who are mentored and discipled in dispensational theology. Yeah. And then I think on the Democratic side, there are a lot of secular Jewish donors who gave to these universities and are just appalled at what they have seen their dollars go through. And I think you're seeing a lot of Democrats, that's part of their base, are responding to that. And then I think there are probably people on both sides to varying degrees that are legitimately appalled and offended at this on an individual level.
Naomi, same question. Why? What do you see happening right now? Why this right now?
Well, I think Steve is, largely right in setting the stage, and certainly the way that college students have been discriminated against on campus under the pretext, which I don't think is organic at all, of protests against Israel's actions in Gaza. I think he's right. Donors are upset. Jews are upset. Parents are upset. But I don't think that's how can I put it? I don't think that's all we're seeing here, right. Although it's a kind of impressive way to thread the needle. I was worried that this bill would be a censorship bill, because I always worry whenever anything inching toward hate crimes is codified into law in the United States. And there was a very, very bad bill that, under the guise of fighting anti-Semitism, forbade contractors, federal contractors, from supporting Palestine. Just insane. Had a real chilling effect. This bill is actually, I read it. I just read it while we were live. It's very short, and it's very limited. It's not a censorship bill at all, as I read it, which is a relief to me. It actually does something kind of clever and reasonable, unless you want to get rid of, discrimination law altogether and just go back to trying to treat everyone as if they're individuals, which has its benefits. But what this bill actually does is it's limited to educational contexts, and it kind of adds discriminating against Jewish students on campus to the list of groups and subgroups that are already part of the law that involve discrimination on campus, that are forbidden to be discriminated against in educational context, not just college campuses, but schools and generally that accept federal funding. So I kind of think that's fair. If you're going to say you can't bar Black students from campus, which, clearly we should. Obviously, I'd rather the laws were more, universalist and individualized, and said kind of don't bar anyone from campus because of their anything not having to do with their status as students. But if you're going to itemize, which unfortunately our federal government does, Black students shouldn't be barred. Asian American Pacific Islanders, a whole new category, shouldn't be barred or discriminated against. Women shouldn't be discriminated against. If you're going to itemize, well, Jewish students are being discriminated against. And so this is a way for that definition of anti-Semitism to, specifically as it plays out in an educational environment, to be added to the ways in which you're not supposed to discriminate against students if you want to keep your federal funding. I don't think that's terrible. I wish we could do away with all of this kind of picking and choosing and itemizing grievances by race and gender and religion. But, if we're not going to with everyone else, I think it's fair to have a law saying you can't bar Jewish students from going onto their campus. You can't silence them because they're Jewish. You can't persecute them because they're Jewish. Fair enough.
Naomi, when I looked at the bill, what concerned me was there was legislators, I think Gates had like an interview or a press release talking about this bill, where he said, and I don't really trust Gates' analysis, but where he said, the gospel or the Christian faith will be hate speech on campus because of this bill.
Saying that the Jews killed Jesus is one of the things that's Mitch.
Because, and as I understand this, Knox was looking this up. We were trying to figure out, why was Gates making that claim? Does that claim have any legitimacy? And the bill references the definition of anti-Semitism from the Holocaust remembrance.
Does it link to that definition? I'm looking at it right now.
It referenced it.
It doesn't link directly to it. So what it does is just references the definition from the website IHRA. And then if you continue to read down how it's defining it, you find what Gabe is about to reference.
And so on
what is it?
IHRA, it says this.
The definitions.
It says that it gives a bullet point of
What anti-Semitism is.
what anti-Semitism is. Here's one of the bullet points, and it says using the symbols and images associated with classic anti-Semitism.
Right, that's bad.
E.g., claims of Jews killing Jesus or blood libel to characterize Israel or Israelis. Now,
where do you see this? I don't see this on the bill.
It's not on the bill.
There are sometimes different versions depending on how it's been amended, but I'm looking at congress.gov.
Yeah, so right inside of the bill, it references the IHRA, and that's where this information is on
IHRA working definition.
Correct.
Okay. But where do you see this definition involving, did Jews kill Jesus? I just don't see it, and it's all the way down at the end.
Yeah, it's halfway through, I believe, the page. That's what I thought.
Noted. What page are you on? I mean, what database are you?
You want to send me the link? I can text it to Naomi right now.
Send her the text. Yeah.
Just tell me the database, please, because there are different legislative databases, and my site, compiles all the legislative databases. So I'm a real database.
Yeah,
nerd.
I'll find it for you. Let me find it real quick
Steve, have you seen this definition and have you given this any thought as well? I mean, do you think there's anything here?
Why was Matt? Or let me just ask you this question: Why was Matt Gaetz making that claim?
Yeah.
I don't see it. Why don't you take a look on congress.gov? It's HR 6090, right? Antisemitism Awareness Act of 2023, or is that another one?
Go ahead, Steve.
This conversation gets to why I'm opposed to the bill.
Yeah.
Even though I think anti-Semitism is demonic, from a historicity standpoint, I'm a pretty staunch Zionist.
Okay.
But when these things were sent to me by members of Congress, the guidelines that they were given, of what defined anti-Semitism, the things that Knox referenced there were in the guidelines that were given to members of Congress. It's not included in the bill, but from what that organization defines as anti-Semitism, what Knox mentions there is cited in their guidelines. And see, this gets into.
Respectfully, can we just find the definition on the website?
Yep, I'm getting it for you right now.
I mean, there's a lot of nonsense floating around related to anti-Semitism right now. I'm on the IHRA website, though it's loading slowly. Is that where your working definition of anti-Semitism? In the spirit of the Stockholm Declaration, etc., the following examples may serve as illustrations. Manifestations might include the targeting of the state of Israel. Okay, that's bad. Conceived as a Jewish collectivity. However, criticism of Israel cannot be regarded as anti-Semitic. Anti-Semitism frequently charges Jews with conspiring to harm humanity. It is often used to blame Jews. Well, contemporary examples of anti-Semitism in public life, the media, schools, the workplace, and in the religious sphere could, taking into account the overall context, include, but are not limited to, calling for aiding or justifying killing or harming of Jews in the name of a radical ideology or an extremist view of religion, making mendacious, dehumanizing, demonizing, or stereotypical allegations of Jews, I'm just looking for the Jews killing Christ thing because that's the most inflammatory. Oh, here it is. Using the symbols and images associated with classic anti-Semitism, e.g. claims of Jews killing Jesus or blood libel to characterize Israel or Israelis, comparing Israeli policy to that of the Nazis. Well, I'm certainly guilty of that. Holding Jews collectively responsible for the actions of the state of Israel. All right. This is a dumb definition, for sure. It's far too broad. I agree that it's nonsense. And it shouldn't be part of that law because you don't need a definition of anti-Semitism to say that Jewish students shouldn't be discriminated against. Yeah. They just shouldn't be discriminated against because they're Jewish. This really is designed to stifle criticism of Israel, on campus and everywhere. And yeah, I agree with Matt Gaetz and Steve Deace that the wording of this could be used to not teach the New Testament or not teach any number of things that should be taught.
Steve, go ahead, Steve.
The issue with these things is, in this conversation, I'm glad this happened in real time for your audience because it's a perfect illustration of the problem we have. Mm-hmm. Who's defining the terminology here?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay? And what kind of we're literally now, each election, it comes down to whose NGOs and whose NGAs are determining our lives. Okay. And within the Leviathans, within the bureaucracies. You see this with Title IX, for example. We have wide sweeping definitions of what Title IX does and doesn't mean, what rape reporting on campus looks like and what it doesn't mean, depending on what who's competing in sports and who's not. Each time there's and so the kinds of NGOs that a Biden administration are going to consult are going to be ones that come up with these kinds of definitions, ADLs, Southern Poverty Law Centers, and that's my concern. I mean, we're all old enough to remember when The Passion came out 20 years ago this year. What people may not remember is Mel Gibson edited one scene out of the movie. And he did it because the ADL raised a huge stink. Much of The Passion is just Mel's interpretation, cinematic interpretation of the Gospel of Matthew. That's what they take most of The Passion from the Gospel of Matthew. There is a line in the Gospel of Matthew where the Pharisees say to Pilate, hey, his blood will be on our heads and our children's heads then, because, if you go ahead and do this on our behalf, we'll accept the responsibility. Mel filmed that scene and put it in the movie. And the ADL lost its mind over that scene as an anti-Semitic trope. And in deference to them, and because it was largely a squirrel that took away from the rest of the message of the film, Mel took that scene out of the movie. Now, that was 20 years ago. Yeah. Wow. And I don't think many of us would say that the LDA or the ADL has become friendlier on these sorts of topics than it was 20 years ago. And so that's the issue is we're in a society now where we don't agree on basic terminology anymore. And so whose unelected bureaucrats are going to determine what these things mean? And that's why I opposed it. If it was just simply the actions that Naomi cited, I would wholeheartedly endorse it. Right. But because this determines now, this goes beyond discrimination against people because of their religion. Yeah. But now we're going to define what is being religiously bigoted toward them.
That's right.
During 2020, for example, despite my staunch Zionist leanings, I was extremely critical of Benjamin Netanyahu. He had maybe the worst lockdown of any free country in the world. I was extremely critical on my show of Naftali Bennett, still the only religiously observant Jew prime minister in the history of this iteration of Israel, because he turned his nation over and his people over into essentially being Pfizer science experiments and test tubes in real time. Okay, so if this bill were in place, I even went to the point of help me understand how a religiously observant Jew, given the history of his people, hands his people over to a biomedical fascist state. Has he not read a history book? Well, obviously, it's pretty obvious what I'm referencing. Is that anti-Semitic? Is that opinion anti-Semitic? That's the issue now, is when you're in a society where we don't know what a gender is, what a law is, what a border is, what a vaccine is, what a crime is, what a criminal is. I mean, the idea of prosecuting these things when we can't determine definitions. Yeah. I mean, it is, we're beyond Pandora's box here.
But this is where I'm kind of flummoxed. I agree with you, Steve, about the potential dispensational theology from certain Christians in our country, kind of maybe driving maybe a reason to vote for this bill. But why, if they know that this definition is driving the bill, then why would guys like Mike Johnson push it, who would think that preaching the gospel on campus should be free?
I know this may shock you, Gabe, because Mike Johnson's still relatively new at this, but despite his claims of biblical worldview, dude doesn't tell the truth all the time. He promised us. I know. Hold on. It's Memorial Day. It's a holiday. We take a deep breath. Okay. But he promised us his budget bill was the biggest spending cuts we've ever seen. The deficit's exploded by $1.4 trillion just since he signed that a couple of months ago. So yeah, I think that he may not necessarily be the greatest source on these things.
Okay, I'm gonna jump in.
Thank you. I was going to ask you something.
Please do.
I mean, technically on paper, I thoroughly agree with Steve. I really do. And one reason people may not be aware of this very problematic, treacherous definition is that unfortunately the bill doesn't link to it, and there's no excuse for that, right? And this is a real problem with transparency in our government and in our legislative databases. Like, there's no excuse not to have the definition in this bill, even as a set of quotations. It's a short definition. It's clear. It's in clear English, and so it's a stalking horse, right? It's a trick bill designed to. Really, I think actually China's behind this. I don't think Jews are behind this, honestly. I think it's a way to China is using, as we saw from the garbled, anthems. National anthem, as we see from the ruination of a million different symbols that have been venerated, in our country. China is really trying to demoralize us and to cut us off at the knees. And they have a very powerful influence on the universities. And huge amounts of money flow to the universities via NGOs from China and by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation from China. And where I'm going with that is how clever and handy, just like Black Lives Matter was Soros funded, and which is aligned with China. And just like we found that the pro-Palestinian protests, as serious as that issue is, were funded by Soros, right? Aligned with China. It serves in the UN, right? This is an evil cabal that is aligned. And, I've tracked the money flow in my book, The Bodies of Others, and more recently. But this aligns with what they're trying to do to our country, because under the guise of something really nice, and they keep doing it with liking gay people or liking, Black people or liking immigrants. You don't want to be mean. So then they sneak something in that's utterly damaging to our essential constitution, our way of life. So under the guise of not being mean to Jews, they're, sneaking in, or some bad actor. And I don't think this is from Jewish donors. I really don't. Jewish donors don't operate this way. They would have been much more, they would have gotten something much more concrete. This doesn't actually deliver the goods very well. No, you guys, it's kind of uncomfortable for me to have this conversation. I'll be honest with you, because you may not be aware that, there are stereotypes about Jews. Oh, yeah. And one of them is that they get what they pay for, so let's just be a little sensitive, please, as I'm trying to be open-minded and delve into this. Okay. So I just mean concerned parents would be more concrete, like, let my kid go to class, don't harass my child. That's what I mean. Okay. But what this does is, under the guise of being nice to Jews, it stabs our Constitution in the heart, and it completely it creates an open door to silence freedom of speech. And that's something that tyrants have wanted for a long time. And once you have that, if it's China and Soros, which I'm pretty sure it is, then you can go after journalists who are covering the Israel-Palestine conflict, or you can go after the American president who's talking about the Israel-Palestine conflict, right? You've opened a door to just cripple America in a bunch of different ways, and by using lawfare. And you can do it on multiple fronts at once. You can go after universities who teach Middle Eastern history. You can go after universities that teach the New Testament, but you can go after universities that teach the Old Testament, because there's lots of bad things, the children of Israel do in the Old Testament. Yeah. I mean, you can just deliver a communist dream on a platter and just kneecap our country. So I think it's more profound, respectfully, than what you guys are concluding. And I don't think it's organic.
No, I think.
I guess the other, if I may, last thing I want to say is that I don't think, when you're raising this example of, oh my God, the ADL, put pressure on this filmmaker to cut the scene of, the blood be on our hands. Well, I mean, respectfully, and I'm sorry, I don't mean to be mean, but I think that you've shown some ignorance of biblical scholarship and of anti-Semitism and the history of anti-Semitism, respectfully, because that sentence in some of the Gospels, many scholars think was put in later as an anti-Semitic way to react to the division of Jewish Christians and pagan Christians, Pauline Christians, and to play into the hands of Rome by turning people against Jews who were still revolutionaries, who were still trying to overcome Rome, and almost did so in 70 AD. And the other thing you seem not to know, and I'm not saying it's okay to censor, right? But that sentence, the blood is on their hands, it's not a benign sentence. It's been the justification for centuries of what's called blood libel, where Jews were, burned to death in churches and hounded to their death and murdered, and their possessions confiscated because they were accused of having, the blood. Look, the blood is on their hands. You can kill them. You can murder them. Century after century, right. Driven out of country after country, massacred over and over and over again. And it didn't end until the 20th century. And in some places, it still hasn't ended. So maybe it's an overreaction for the, for the ADL to want that to be cut. But arguably, that's not the heart of Jesus's message. Jesus was a Jew. And what you have to understand, and I'm not saying it's okay to censor, right? But leaving that in, it's not hysteria. It's just historically accurate that particular sentence, the blood be on us and on our children, the ADL was right to worry that a hit film, dumping the guilt back on the Jews again when it was arguably put there, in that way for tendentious reasons in the first place. I'm not saying, obviously the Jews participated like the Romans did because everyone was Jewish at that time, including Jesus, except the Romans who crucified Jesus. But to say the blood be on, that specific sentence in a hit Hollywood film arguably could have led to, the equivalent of pogroms or murders or anti-Semitic actions. And I never like to censor, but you've got to look at these things in context.
So Naomi, let me explain just a little bit. One of the reasons why I wanted to talk about this bill is because I always feel like I'm getting played when there's a specific bill dedicated to protect some sort of special interest group. In the same way, remember when we discussed the anti-lynching bill?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And all the Congress and Senate voted for it and all that stuff. We were being played in that bill too. But what white person couldn't have voted against it?
Right.
Oh, wait, you're for lynching black people still?
Right, yeah.
2000 and when was that, 19 or when it got passed?
When are you going to stop beating your wife?
Yeah, when are you going to stop beating your wife kind of thing? And so my concern is in these bills is like, okay, like what you're trying to get at, and Steve pointed out this a little bit, is like, okay, what's the bigger issue and play they're trying to run here?
Right.
Secondly, let me finish this point, Naomi. Let me finish one thing, and then I'll let you talk. Secondly, just theologically, we're Presbyterian Christians here in the room, and we so we believe the Old Testament and New Testament. And at no point do I think the Jews are the whipping boys in the room. Now, at the same time, the New Testament specifically blames all people for killing Jesus, and then also blames the Romans for killing Jesus. And there's specific verses just dedicated talking about the Romans, Pontius Pilate killing Jesus, all
and
that
the
stuff.
Jews.
And then there's specific verses where it says in Acts, I just read it to the guys before the show began, where it specifically said, and you, the Jews, killed Jesus. So I think we all deserve the blame for it.
Yeah.
And I don't want to.
And at no point, and I think it's worth agreeing just because people have used Bible verses to justify sin and evil.
Oh, I know.
And racism.
Yeah.
Right.
You know
that? Oh, a little bit.
But part of the reason we can go back and say that's wicked. It was wicked for people to then go murder Jews because of the so-called blood libel is because the Bible tells us that. The Bible tells us that that's murder. We're not to execute the children for the crimes of the parents. Like that's a law in Scripture. But so I think you can say, you can have the debate over whether that line is original to the Scriptures or not. I believe that it is, but I agree that at no point are we allowed.
Respectfully, it's not in the Hebrew Gospel of Matthew, which arguably is one of the earliest texts, and it's in Hebrew because the followers of Jesus were Jewish.
Yeah, I think Matthew was the gospel that was targeting the Jews. It was specifically trying to connect and reach out, address to the Jews. Thank you. That's a better word. And to Toby's point, again, Naomi, if that phrase is in the gospel or not, that doesn't bother me, because what I'm trying to communicate is that the Bible still pins the death of Jesus on the Jews.
Yeah,
it still pins the death of Jesus on the Romans, and it still pins the death of Jesus on all of us. For all of sin, fallen short of the glory of God.
This is okay. Are you done, or am I interrupting?
No,
you?
Please go. Please.
I mean, I just find this so painful. Why can't we just say we're all Americans? We have a separation of church and state, thank God, or freedom of conscience, thank God. No religious partisanship should be in any bill.
Yeah, I agree. That's why this bill's got me so.
Why can't we leave the, really, in my view, icky and counterproductive debates about who killed Jesus to the proper sphere, which is, your synagogue or your Bible study group, rather than, the thing that Jews are scared of, honestly, is that people who say they believe in Jesus will bring a spillover of what is often not even Jesus's words, right, into legislation and into policymaking. And that has led, again, to the murder of us, again and again and again. So that's what we're scared of. And, we hear people say, I have friends, dear friends, who are famous conservatives, and they say, I don't want a, multicultural America. I want a Christian America. Well, God bless you. Have a Christian Sunday, have a Christian life, have a Christian family, have a Christian faith tradition, have a Christian dedication in everything you want to dedicate to Christianity. But America is not supposed to be, to have an established faith. Our founders were very wise in that regard. And so that's the tyranny that a lot of us are scared of. And if we overreact, it's not a good idea. And it's always bad to, pass ill-defined bills. But I do think respectfully that, Christian conservatives should engage in some self-reflection about this issue.
Steve, you want to reply to any of this?
If you have a specific question, I will answer it.
That might be the wisest thing said.
He's a smart man. I'm going to read this ad. That's what I'm going to do. God the Father is waiting and looking down the road for all his prodigal sons to return. Will prodigal America return to the Father in repentance, confessing that Jesus Christ is Lord, or will we fall to our own destruction? Become a pillar of salt as a memorial for other nations. Join us on Reformation Weekend, October 31st, November 2nd in Fort Worth, Texas, for our annual Fight, Laugh, Feast conference. This year, the theme is Prodigal America. You'll spend the weekend hearing from George Grant, Dusty Devers, Steve Deace, James White, Doug Wilson, and more. We're going to sing psalms together. We're going to feast together. We're going to have a great time together. Get your tickets today at prodigalamerica.com, prodigalamerica.com.
So, Naomi, if I understand you correctly, because I've been trying to listen and understand your position on this bill, you like the bill in one sense, if we're going to start creating different groups for people to make sure that they don't get discriminated against, but you don't like the definition of anti-Semitism from that the bill is referencing. What would you, is that correct?
Not exactly.
Okay.
As soon as I clicked through to the definition, I did not like the bill, because the bill is predicated on a definition that is destructive and nonsensical. If the bill just said don't discriminate against Jews on campus or in educational institutions, add Jews and being Jewish to the list of, ways you're not supposed to discriminate against people according to Title IX and Title VII and EEOC law, I would have no problem with it. Except for the theoretical problem that I don't like itemizing anybody, because you shouldn't discriminate against anyone. And that's how the Civil Rights Act of 1963 was written. And that's good law. However, the definition of anti-Semitism makes it a bad bill that should not go through.
So if the definition was removed from it and it just said don't discriminate, you'd be fine with the bill?
Well, again, that's kind of presuming that that's the best we can do. I really want to get rid of all of these nonsensical itemizations of race, class, and gender, and just say, don't discriminate, treat everyone equally. And then if you can prove in a civil suit that your group has been discriminated against, then you get damages and corrective action. But I don't think we should be itemizing identities in the law anymore.
100%.
So I guess, and so then you would define discrimination as you can't come here because you're a Jew. You can't come here because you're black. You can't come here because you're a woman.
Well, discrimination law actually has a lot of different definitions, especially on an educational, in an educational context. It's already well codified. For instance, if there's an unequal work environment or an environment in which some groups are promoted at the expense of other groups, that's illegal. If you get benefits for being a member of some group and if you're not a member of that group, that's illegal. But that's, again, thoroughly well-established law. It has been since the Civil Rights Act, and we don't need to make it better. We just need to apply it, effectively and systematically. But right now, a lot of people are being discriminated against. And I think we should just leave it. I mean, I think we should take out all of the labels and we've got a really good civil rights law, really good EOC law, and, let people bring their lawsuits and show that they've been discriminated against. We actually don't need to itemize like this because I believe Title IX already includes religion as one of the things that you are not allowed to discriminate against. I looked that up, but I think it's already been covered.
It's the death of the Constitution, though.
Well, that's where I was about
really where this goes.
Yeah,
right?
That's where I was going to go to. Why not? Let's just get.
Well, can I ask? I want to ask Steve a follow-up question.
Go ahead.
And then if you want to go there.
Me and Knox were going a certain way. No, Steve, and you're taking.
I got 1,000 questions right now.
No, so Steve, if we recognize, so there is an increase of anti-Semitism, straight up, and not just people that are saying, quoting Bible verses or whatever, but actually people who are discriminating against Jews, blocking them from classes, this kind of thing, and worse. What if congressmen are contacting you, and they're saying, "What do we do about this?" What advice do you give them?
Well, I like what Naomi had to say, because we're disempowering NGOs and NGAs. And instead, we're using systems and processes that are accountable to people. In a civil trial, you'd be accountable to a judge or a jury, for example, as she articulated, in terms of a process to prove discrimination. Right now, we are largely governed by unelected bureaucrats and that just don't have accountability to the people directly. And so that's not any form of small r Republican government or any form of small d democracy. That's just a rather large oligarchy of NGOs and NGAs that are in place. So I like that as a process. And then I would do this really old fashioned thing where we just punish people when they commit crimes. That's weird. You're not allowed to threaten someone bodily harm. That's a crime. You're not allowed to inflict bodily harm. That's a crime.
That's right.
No person shall be denied life, liberty, or property without due process of law. Okay, so that's a crime. I mean, I kind of just like this thing where we just took when people did bad behavior and just kind of punished it for bad behavior. I'd probably just go back to doing that.
So,
and a lot of this is I agree with Steve, and a lot of the remedies are in state law, and you don't even have to go to federal law. In other words, it's already probably a state crime in all of those states where those kids are being kept from going onto campus to be held against their will. It's actually a form of battery. It's actually a criminal act to hold someone against their will to prevent them from, going where they want to go. I mean, of course, unless you're a government public health body in 2021, but from that, you're not allowed to detain people unlawfully. So
wasn't one of the Palestinian protesters took over a building and they
blockaded it.
They blockaded it, but there was a janitor or someone inside the building that they basically kidnapped for 2 hours. Right?
Super scary.
Yeah.
Terrible national security threat as well. I keep being braced for these situations to be hostage situations because we don't know who these people are. there's an app called Boycat, and the app is harvesting these kids' data and their personal geolocating them. And it's just a complete dream setup for an October 7th situation. But I totally agree with all of you. I mean, this is already illegal. And so these administrators who are allowing people to be detained essentially against their will or kidnapped against their will, they're probably criminally liable. I mean, there should be a lot of criminal and civil actions that are following from this that don't restrict freedom of speech and that don't create tendentious categories. But you can't look. Ultimately, I'm a First Amendment absolutist, and I don't like anti-Semitism. It scares me to death. I know where it heads. However, you can't censor hatred out of existence.
No.
And I've also studied the history of censorship for my doctoral thesis, and it never works, right? So if there's a rise in anti-Semitism or a rise in anti-Black feeling or a rise in anti-gay feeling, you're not going to pass a law to stop people from feeling that way. And certainly censorship just makes it worse.
This is actually where the Protestant Christian tradition has a
Toby,
yeah.
Can I add one personal anecdote really quick just to reinforce what Naomi said?
Yeah, go for it.
Friends Daniel Horowitz, my colleague at the Blaze, told me last week a close family member of his had gotten accepted to an elite medical internship, but it was going to have to be in New York City. They take like 5 kids every year. It's the elite of the elite. And she turned it down because she felt unsafe and is going to school in Florida instead.
Yeah.
Okay. That just so we understand, because I'm guilty of this too. When we discuss and debate these things, what's the bill number? What's the definition? What NGO? What NGA? I think we also need to also remember there are real human souls made in the likeness and image of God here that are not numbers, Bob Seger. They're more than that. Okay. And that's just, this was a lifetime of this young woman's work that she is not going to fulfill because she's not safe staying there, and she won't be protected. They won't punish evil. They won't punish bad behavior. They will not bring the sword of righteousness against the evildoer. And so she's going to turn down the opportunity of a lifetime and move to Florida instead and take a lesser path to her career because she's going to put her safety first. Yeah.
This is what I was going to say is, and thank you for sharing that, Steve. I think one of the great inheritances that we've received from the Judeo-Christian heritage, going back to the Old Testament and then reaffirmed in the New Testament, is actually what Naomi was saying earlier, which is actually a separation of powers and a separation of jurisdictions. State and church have different roles, both under God, I would argue, but the magistrate has a job of punishing crimes.
Right.
And not all sins are crimes, and that's what Naomi's getting at. Is hatred in the heart is a sin.
It's not a crime,
but until it actually manifests itself out in outward action,
physical action,
and threats, and so on, it's not a crime, and that's where you have different jurisdictions, and that's why you need churches.
Toby?
Yeah, go ahead.
I think we should define what that is, because the powers that a government would have to claim in order to punish thought before it becomes deed turns that government into an absolute tyranny.
Right.
That's and so we cannot perfect the world east of Eden.
Right.
That's just the reality of living in a fallen creation. And so if you give government the power to punish thought before it manifests itself as a reality, we're sinners. I mean, I will think idle, dumb, evil things indiscriminately, constantly, and have no idea where these thoughts even come from. They come from me, come from outside of me. All right. If we punish thought on that level, the power we'd have to give to government to do that would turn that government into a monolithic tyranny. And that's why we have to make that distinction that you just talked about.
That's right. And that's why, but like family and church and pastors and mentors, these are people that can, not that we can actually get at one another's hearts and souls and thoughts, but parents and pastors and friends at least have a relationship where you can get closer
and influence
and actually try to address things in the heart. But we don't want the government doing that. And that's one of the reasons why, going back to the Old Testament, God actually established these differences,
these separations.
The priests and Aaron and his sons, they were the ones that were in charge of the holy space and worship. And it was the magistrates, the judges, they were in charge of crimes, and they had actually separate jurisdictions.
Right.
That goes all the way back to Moses, and that's what built out Christian common law. And that's what our country was built on, was this Christian tradition that said there are certain things that we don't want the government doing, and that needs to be addressed by other jurisdictions, families, churches, other leaders, and associations.
You know, I was thinking in all this, there's been a lot of conversation recently. And this kind of maybe gets a little bit also to the heart of when I see an anti-lynching bill or when I see an anti-Semitic bill, that our Constitution, or what was our Constitution, you know, is our, there's been a big conversation like, is our Constitution dead? Is our Constitution, does it even function? Does it even have a civic muscle anymore? Which is why you have all these, you know, anti-this, anti-that bills, special interest racist bills coming in. And so it seems to me like the bigger problem here is we actually, our Constitution isn't functioning like it used to. And it, even to me, basically seems some sort of dead in our current civic enforcement world. Which, and I think that gets at the Biden's lawfare too.
It's like what Naomi was getting at. Is like, I mean, when I think you can tell, like parents, like you're failing at your job as parents if you're just like running around making rules constantly. No doing that, no doing that, no doing that, tells you that you're in a state of chaos. And what Naomi's pointing out is our government's starting to do that. We're like just listing all the things you can't do constantly, particularly about discrimination in this case. And I think that's an indicator that, that's right. That our culture's in chaos.
So, Naomi, what would you just say about like the state of our Constitution as it relates to, you know, let's say a bill like this?
I just want to let you know I have to leave in 2 minutes at the top of the hour.
Perfect.
That's okay. Well, respectfully, I don't agree. I think our Constitution is, you know, it's always perfect as human beings can make a mission statement, and nothing killed the Constitution except people not following the Constitution. The Constitution's fine. We're the ones who are messed up, or, you know, our leaders who are ignoring the Constitution are messed up. I think that this bill would probably be found unconstitutional if it were taken on First Amendment grounds. You know, if it were passed, it would be challenged. But I guess I just want to end my participation by, again, calling attention to what I think is the bigger picture, which really doesn't have anything to do, again, with these divisions. The divisions are the means that the bad guys are getting what they want. And let's look at what's happened as a result of these protests on campus, right? And, I just want to say I really think the safety of the people of Gaza and the need for everyone to obey international humanitarian law is really important, just like the safety of the, civilians in Israel is really important. But I don't think that that's the main goal of these protests. There was two California universities just didn't hold commencement. Columbia University, one of the top Ivy League schools, did not hold commencement. Memorial Day, I just sent a loved one who goes to Princeton an image of these kids protesting for Palestine, disrupting, so shocking, an observation of Memorial Day and of the dead Americans who gave their lives for this country. You're going to see more and more and more disruptions, and the goal is the same thing as that tampering with the it's amazing that they're able to be so effective, and AI has a role in this too, right? Because you see these incremental shredding of our symbols. The real target is the kids on campus and the kids in schools, where what they're being taught is there is no social contract left in the United States. No matter how hard you work, you can't count on that wonderful day when you graduate from Columbia University or from Cal Poly Humboldt or from UCLA. At any moment, this can be pulled out from under you, and you can't believe in anything. Nothing matters anymore. Or, it doesn't matter that it's Memorial Day. At any moment, the most sacred observation, it's part of our American tradition, can be upended, overturned, silenced, crowded out. That's what's really going on. And we should all unite, whatever religion or race we are or gender, to see that the goal is to destroy what unites us and to destroy our country, which beautifully isn't supposed to treat us differently on the basis of our religion, race, or gender.
Naomi, one comment, and then you can go. We are our pastor's friends here in town. His one of our elders, his son was one of the two boys, young men, standing against the Palestinians trying to break into Columbia Hall. I forget the name of the hall, but the hall at Columbia University. Yeah. And so we're very aware of what happened at Columbia, and his graduation got canceled in COVID due to government tyranny. And now because of the Palestinian protests, his graduation got canceled at Columbia. So crazy, but thank you so much.
Thank you for your time. We know you got to run.
Yeah, we really appreciate your time, Naomi. Thank you very much.
Steve, don't you go nowhere yet, Steve. You still got to finish this out. Constitution dead or no?
I think Naomi used a very key phrase there, social contract. I refer to it often on my show as the social compact. That is dead in America. And the Constitution begins with the words, we the people. Okay. And so this is like, when Jesus is debating the Sabbath and he says the Sabbath was made for man and not man for the Sabbath. Yeah. Okay. And that the Constitution was made for us. We weren't made for the Constitution. Okay. We made the Constitution. And the Constitution is an itemization, a quantifying of a social contract, a social compact. Because we want to live together, here are the rules of engagement. Here are basically how we will conduct civic affairs, battles over faith and ethics, how we'll do civil war via the ballot box. All these rules of engagement are all laid out in this Constitution. And then it offers opportunities to amend it as things change, as society changes. It even offers the opportunity through an Article 5 to completely to hit a Control-Alt-Delete and reboot it if things get that bad.
Yep.
But here's the thing. One side of this argument has determined it doesn't want to live by that social compact anymore. That it wants to redefine, that they've gone full Darth Vader. I am altering the deal. Pray I don't alter it any further.
Yeah.
And they're terraforming this in real time now. And the old culture war debates, we used to debate things like, is something unconstitutional or not? Okay. Is a social safety net unconstitutional? Or what if it expands to like a Medicare program for elderly people? Does the general welfare clause apply to that? And we could argue, debate, we could vehemently disagree over those things. Okay. What's happening, but the debate were things that were well-intentioned, but were they still constitutional? What we're dealing with now is anti-constitutional. The intent is to undo the schema and framework of the Constitution. That is the intent. So it is not that the Constitution is dead. It is that one side of the social compact has determined it doesn't want to live by it anymore. Mm-hmm. It is determined we don't want to be married anymore unless it's completely under our own conditions. We can have an open marriage. We can treat the children any way that we want. Okay. No, the old binds of fidelity are no longer applicable. We'll stay married to you provided you allow us to redefine what that union actually looks like and requires of us. And you let us define what it's required of you. Yeah. So it only works one side. That's why every time you turn on Tolerance Boulevard, it's a one-way street. What I am concerned about on the right is, what is your alternative then if the Constitution is dead? Okay. And there's this idea on the right. We just keep exposing corruption and stuff. Like people, like there's literally a person that doesn't know that would ever consider voting our way. You can't trust the media. Like you're going to find that person. Like there's literally a person who doesn't know that would ever vote our way. Politicians are corrupt. And that there is some like magic line of exposure that, and then once we reach it, we'll have some French Revolution style of the Bastille. I'm a Christian. I don't want another French Revolution. Thanks.
Right.
We're gonna hit there. All right. Right after they got done, Robespierre put all the same amount of people in prison that the aristocracy did, just different people, and they called it the Reign of Terror. Right. Okay. I'm not looking for that. Okay. I like American revolutions. No king but Jesus. Yep. All right. Government limited under the jurisdictions defined by God. All right. The Geneva Bible that Naomi's studying, Congress actually passes that out to people. Okay. Yep. That's the revolution that I like. And I'm for that revolution. Anything else, I think, is not a revolution worthy of joining. And so what do we do instead? I'm going to go back to what I said to Toby earlier. All right. I think we just, this is going to be shocking. Punish evil. That's what I want.
Right.
What I want is when a government official calls up Facebook and says, practice censorship, I want that guy charged with a crime and put in prison. That's a violation of the First Amendment. That's a crime. All right. If the Constitution is the law of the land, you're violating it. That's a crime. I want people punished. I don't want to illegally search and seizure my political opponents. I want to elect people who will punish them when they illegally search and seizure me. Yep. That's what I want. Okay. I want the social compact restored. What we have right now is one side believes they can do whatever the hell they want. Literally, literal hell. That's not a pejorative. Yeah. It is an accurate description. Literally, from the bowels of hell, they can conjure in their own depraved minds anything they want, and there's no one to say no and no one to stop them. And how dare you? That needs to be punished. If that is not punished, if evil is not punished, let me tell you where this will go next. Okay, the same people saying the Constitution are dead are the same people that follow John Brown to Harper's Ferry. That's what will come next. All right. And then what will come after that is Fort Sumter. That's how this goes every single time. Yeah. All right. Two cannot walk arm in arm unless they see eye to eye. House divided against itself cannot stand. We can't be unevenly yoked. Someone will reign. Okay. Someone's in charge down here. All right. It's either Caesar and or slash us, or it's the Lord. Those are your only options. Okay. Right. And so if we are not going to punish evil, if we are going to say to the other side, hey, you can put some 88-year-old Tennessee woman in prison for the rest of her life for daring to pray at the front door of an abortion clinic, and an elderly lady with a fake hip who sat in Nancy Pelosi's chair, her life would be on January 6th, where if she had done it on January 5th, 7th, 8th, 9th, or 10th, she'd be fine. But she did it this day, so her life is over. Yeah. Okay. On the other hand, we can have Hamastan on Ivy League campuses, and everyone gets away with it, and no one's charged. We can have 16 square blocks of Seattle turned into a foreign country called Chaz, and nobody gets shot for being part of an invading army on our own soil. You see where I'm going with this? Yeah. If we don't punish this stuff, what will happen next is John Brown. And I wrote a column about this a couple of years ago. I can hear the train a coming. It's rolling around the bend. This is how it goes, guys. History doesn't just repeat. It also rhymes. Okay. Yeah. That's how we're going to Harper's Ferry first and Fort Sumter next. I got 3 kids. They're all in young adults or about to enter adulthood. I have the absolute most gorgeous granddaughter you've ever seen. I'd like to avoid Harper's Ferry and Fort Sumter if we can. All right. Mm-hmm. But we're going there if we don't restore mutually assured destruction. If we don't restore certain deterrents, you don't get to do that to me. Because of what I'll do to you in response. Laws of the jungle that were itemized and codified and under English common law and Christian common law, restitutional justice, eye for an eye. That's what that stuff meant. You don't get to just take things from people, then it'll be taken from you. Okay. We need to restore that, or we're going to Harper's Ferry and then we're going to Fort Sumter. That's how this will end.
Did he just give his conference talk?
He's going to talk more on idolatry too.
Was that
yeah. So I think, Steve, that's really helpful. But I think people frequently think that the options, I think, are
this or that.
If we keep playing by constitutional rules, that means that conservatives lose and liberals win.
Well, that's a different question. First of all, I've heard that argument. So I'm not allowed to debase myself for Christ.
Right.
We're not allowed to do that. I'm not allowed to sin so that grace may come. Okay. Yeah. I'm not allowed to throw myself off a building because he will not cause my foot to dash against a stone. I'm not allowed to do those things. All right. So, we're as Christians, we're part of a higher kingdom. And so we do have a rule of engagement threshold that the devil does not. But that's not what is being discussed today. What you're talking about is basically the constitutional version of baseball's unwritten rules.
Right.
All right.
Right.
And with guys like Eric Erickson and David French and all these other guys, and I'm not comparing Erickson to French one to one, but they're all is somewhere in the denominations of these camps. Like David French would be like the Episcopalian Rainbow Unitarian minister of it, okay? And Eric Erickson would be like, the Mennonite version of it, okay? But within this wannabe, quasi-Anabaptist world, okay, that these people are constructing, there's this idea that we have rules of engagement that are like baseball's unwritten rules, okay? Like, I won't look at your signs if you don't look at mine. I won't throw at your guy if you don't throw at mine. These are things that may or may not be explicitly in the rules. Most of them aren't. Okay. That's all hogwash. All right. So here's what I can't do. I can't lie. Well, I can't bear false witness.
Sure.
I can't murder. I can't steal. Okay. And I can't covet to the point of taking something that doesn't belong to me or becoming bitter. So like there's 10 things I can't do.
Right.
That's the 10.
Right.
Okay. Anything other than those 10, I'm perfectly allowed to play to win.
Yeah.
In fact, Jesus said, the kingdom of heaven has been forcibly advancing and violent men lay hold of it. The children of men are smarter than the children of light.
Yep.
And you guys know the translation of the word smart or intelligence there is like a cunning.
Yep.
Okay. Is what he's talking about, like a shrewdness.
Yep.
Okay. One of my favorite underrated moments in the Old Testament is in Ruth.
Yep.
And with Boaz.
Yep.
And Boaz loves this woman. He loves her. He wants to marry her, but he's not first in line in the kinsman redeemer law. Someone else is, a man whose name we never know.
Yep.
So he goes down to the city gate and he negotiates with her kinsman redeemer. And what he tells him is true. Doesn't tell him everything that's true. But the guy also doesn't show any more inquisitiveness, like he really wants to know more. It's very clear he only sees Ruth as a piece of property. So he says, hey, I'm going to take on this woman who's a Moabitess, and she comes with a mother-in-law. And the guy's like, I'm out. Good. I'll take it. Okay. Is what he said true? Yeah. Does he mention that they've repented and left and joined the covenant? He left some details out, but he didn't say anything that wasn't true. He's very shrewd. Now, how does God honor that shrewdness? Because Boaz's motivations is he loves Ruth and wants to marry her and make an honest woman out of her and bring her into the covenant. That's his motivation. All right. And because of that loving motivation, God honors that and by placing their son in the genealogy of Messiah.
Right.
All right. So shrewdness is fine. All right. No one is like saying to Corey Ten Boom, why'd you lie to the Nazis about the Jews in your attic? Okay. No one's saying to Rahab, why'd you lie to the pagans about the Jews you were hiding on your roof?
Yep.
Okay.
Right.
No one does that. So are we being deceptive or bearing false witness with the intent of promulgating ourselves, okay, as opposed to showing the integrity and the hierarchy of values of the kingdom of God? That's what I believe that commandment means. Short of breaking a commandment, I can do whatever it takes to win. What these other guys over here you're talking about want to do is, well, there's just certain things I can't say. There's certain things I can't do. It would be, we should instead write a piece in National Review about them arresting pro-lifers rather than, arresting them for doing it. Wrong. Okay. I'm all for restitutional justice. Here are the options: restitutional justice or Harper's Ferry on the road to Fort Sumter. Those are your only two options. Choose wisely. That's all you got. That's it.
Was that your David French voice? I think that was. Oh wow, Steve! I always enjoy having you on the show, brother.
October can't come fast enough.
Cannot come fast enough. Appreciate you, man. Thank you so much.
Thanks for joining us on Memorial Day, giving us some of your time, sir.
Yeah,
you bet. Thanks, guys. God bless.
See you.
If you're single, get married. If you're married, have you some kids. If you have kids, go baptize them. Until tomorrow, love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. Go fight, laugh, and feast. This is Cross Politic.